All righty, since we do have a packed agenda today, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Lily and I'm with the Nature Conservancy in New Jersey. And we're kicking off our winter webinar series with Dr. Ardith Bondi today. She will be giving her Tale of Many Penguins presentation. Although unfortunately there are not penguins in New Jersey, the Nature Conservancy in New Zealand has worked with penguins, so I'm going to be sure to share a link to that article in the chat. Cool Green Science, TNC's nature blog, also has some really great blogs that are focused on penguins, so I'll be sure to share that as well. And before we begin, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. So for starters, we have enabled closed captionings for this webinar. To access the closed captionings, you'll see a button towards the bottom of your screen that says Show Captions. Just click on that and they should turn on for you. Following Dr. Bondi's presentation, there will be time for a Q&A, so be sure to have your questions ready. You may notice that there is a Q&A chat box feature for this webinar. Please be sure to post all of your questions in that chat box rather than the regular chat. This will minimize the amount of notifications during the presentation. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you want to rewatch it or share it with a friend, you will have that option available for you. And with that out of the way, we're going to get started. Today's guest speaker is Dr. Ardith Bondi. Ardith Bondi lives in Manhattan. She earned a PhD in pharmacology from Columbia University and continued medical research at New York University Medical Center and at the Rockefeller University before leaving research to perform as a flutist. After years of performing and teaching, she still plays in the Senate Symphony in Manhattan and photographs birds near her home and in many other interesting places far removed. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Bondi.
Thank you, Lily, and the Nature Conservancy for inviting me. Since I'm often asked, I took all of the photos in this talk with the exception of one taken of me with my camera by an unknown fellow traveler. I began my penguin odyssey in 1992 when my sister-in-law invited me to join her on a trip to the subantarctic island of South Georgia. And as we approached the first colony of at least 100,000 king penguins, I was completely hooked. By 2018, I was lucky enough to be able to visit the Snow Hill Island Emperor Penguin Colony. There, these emperor penguin chicks were being guarded by an adult while their parents were out fishing. In emperor penguin daycare, the chicks follow the leader, as penguins frequently do. Safety in numbers is the rule for many penguin species, and for chicks, following adults keeps them from getting isolated from the colony, which would make them vulnerable to flying predators like the kelp gull that just flew by, or skuas, or giant petrels. Penguins, like these adeles on the Antarctic Peninsula, are considered an indicator species for the overall health of the marine ecosystem. Their presence and abundance reflects changes in sea ice or krill and other food availability, particularly as affected by commercial fishing and by climate change. On this map of the world, the red lines in the southern hemisphere represent where penguins come ashore to nest. The northernmost are the Galapagos penguins at the equator. Polar bears, which live north of the green line, and other four-legged mammalian predators are part of the reason why small, flightless ground-nesting seabirds like penguins could not survive in the northern seas. Penguins and polar bears never meet in the wild. With the South Pole at the center, the pale blue areas all around the southern hemisphere give another view of where penguins come ashore to nest and rear young. The equatorial Galapagos penguins are over here at the left. The red spots indicate the areas, including lots of islands, that I have visited to see penguins in the wild. Between 1992 and 2019, I took about a dozen trips that included penguins. The name penguin was originally given to the now extinct great auk, which lived in the northern hemisphere off the coast of Newfoundland and is pictured here in a painting by John James Audubon. The great auk was an owlcid similar to the puffin, but when European explorers came upon what we know as penguins, probably gentoos in the southern hemisphere, they named them for their similarity in appearance to the great auk. Whereas owlcids like the puffins on the left are considered to be more closely related to shorebirds and gulls, the Pterodriformes, penguins are believed to be more closely related to albatrosses and petrels, the Procellariformes. The similarity between penguins and puffins is an oft-cited example of convergent evolution. These horned puffins on St. Paul Island in Alaska and this Fiordland penguin in New Zealand, also known by its Maori name Tawaki, are all dark on the back and white on the front, a color pattern called counter shading. When swimming in the ocean, birds with this coloration are hard for predators to see from below against the bright sky and from above against the dark ocean. Most penguin species with light-colored feet, like Tawaki, have black on the backs of their heels and on the soles of their feet to continue the counter shading when they stretch out their feet behind them. While swimming, penguins' feet are not used for paddling, but only for steering and braking. All of their forward motion comes from paddling with their flippers, their adapted wings. Puffins, on the other hand, paddle underwater with their feet as well as with their wings. But unlike penguins, they can still use their wings to fly to nest on cliffs, which helps them evade land predators. Penguins and puffins, both diving birds, have solid bones to facilitate diving. The penguin's flipper, illustrated on the right, is a highly efficient paddle evolved from the flying bird wing, illustrated by the goose wing skeleton on the left. The goose bones are hollow and thin to lighten their weight for flight. Penguins' solid flipper bones have become thickened and flattened, and the would-be joints are almost completely fused. Their flippers can only be moved from the shoulder, but can twist more than most birds, allowing for forward propulsion with both up and down strokes while they are swimming. The only other birds capable of this type of motion are hummingbirds. But penguin flippers are not just useful for paddling. Penguins use their flippers for balance when walking, like these fat gentoos returning full of fish on Sea Lion Island on the Falklands, or for balance or paddle assist when tobogganing on snow or ice, as this emperor and these at Snow Hill, or this Adelie at Brown Bluff on the Antarctic Peninsula. Flippers are part of the thermoregulatory system of penguins. When the birds get warm, for example, from swimming fast or running to evade predators, like this gentoo coming rapidly ashore on Sea Lion Island, the blood vessels in their flippers dilate to expose more surface area to the cool air. This gives a pink color to the underside of the flipper. The blood vessels in their feet also dilate to help with cooling. Flippers are used to express affection, as between these Magellanic penguins on Martello Island in the Beagle Channel in Argentina, or these rockhopper penguins on Sea Lion, or these king penguins courting on Saunders Island in the Falklands. Here, flippers were used for balance and for making a point when this rockhopper encountered a black-browed albatross on its way up the cliff to its colony on Saunders Island. That's probably as big as he can make himself look. The albatross were nesting on the cliff next to the rockhoppers, and once those two got over their surprise, they went on with their respective activities. Rockhoppers can be pretty aggressive, and flipper slapping is another way in which they make use of their solid-boned and exceptionally strong flippers. They can also bite with their strong, razor-sharp bills designed primarily for catching fish. The rockhopper on the right flipper slapped its opponent, who in defense grabbed the flipper in its beak. Not everything that penguins do is cute. As those two rockhoppers continued their battle, their open mouths revealed protuberances present in all penguins' mouths, which helped them catch and swallow fish. They even have those protuberances on their tongues, like this emperor. Penguins often get into squabbles, usually over space or a partner. This squabble was by a freshwater stream, and the conflict may have been over access to the prized fresh water. Nearby, another rockhopper was enjoying a drink from the spring. The stream was flowing directly above their colony on Saunders. Rockhoppers often position their colonies near fresh water. Penguins can drink and process salt water, eliminating the excess salt from their bloodstreams with a supraorbital gland in their foreheads, like many seabirds. But the number of penguins accessing the stream suggests they will go out of their way for a freshwater drink when it's available. Penguins undergo what is called a catastrophic molt. They lose all their feathers at once, usually once a year. This is a molting king penguin on South Georgia. For penguins, a fully intact feathering is imperative to maintain warmth and waterproofing in the cold sea environment. When their feathers become worn over the course of parenting or being exposed to sunlight, they need fresh ones. Since they can exchange a few feathers at a time like many birds and stay warm and dry, they have solved this problem by molting all their feathers at once. The penguin will molt either before or after nesting, depending on the species. But first, it must fatten up by going to sea for a few weeks to gorge on fish, since it will have to fast for the duration of its feather exchange. While the bird is out fattening up, it begins to form new feathers beneath the old. Once it leaves the water and chooses a safe place to undergo its molt, which can even be an iceberg, the new feathers push out the old ones. For 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the species, the poor penguin looks like a leaky feather pillow. Another king, also on South Georgia, is further along with its molt and is showing some new feathers. Emperors and kings also replace the colored plates on their bills during the course of a molt. There's an interesting series of studies showing the significance of the orange auricular patches on the sides of the head. When researchers blackened those patches on a male king penguin, he was unable to attract a mate. Partially blackening them delayed that attraction. So those colored head patterns are very important for social recognition as well as for decoration. These are molted king penguin feathers. Penguins' short feathers overlap closely, having downy tufts and lots of downy plumule near the base for warmth and a stiff part at the surface. Barbs on both sides of the shaft help hold them tightly together, making them waterproof. The downy part at the base is connected to special muscles, which they can use to control the feathers to trap air for additional insulation and to release that air to improve their speed when swimming. When penguins get oiled, their feathers clump and separate, breaking this insulation and exposing them to hypothermia. That's in addition to getting poisoned by the oil when they try to preen it off. This pretty Humboldt at Moody Gardens Aquarium in Galveston, Texas, was zipping around in the tank and forcing bubbles from its feathers, visualized in a bubble trail. This mechanism for drag reduction is referred to as air lubrication, a phenomenon thought to be used by penguins to shoot rapidly out of water. When a group of penguins enters the water and all release this bubble trail, in addition to giving them speed, it reduces visibility to predators. In this image, the use of the feet as rudders is visible. Also evident is the effectiveness of black on the bottoms of their feet, continuing the counter shading on their backs. This Fiordland or Tawaki penguin was just in from the ocean. Like all penguins and many birds, part of its preening routine is to squeeze the uropygial gland at the base of its tail in order to spread the fine waterproofing oil from it onto its feathers. Penguins do a lot of preening, particularly when they return from the ocean. It's a good opportunity to keep their plumage in working order. These are gentoos on Green Rincon Beach on Pebble Island in the Falklands. Preening is necessary even when they land in glowing sand, like these gentoos on Sea Lion. Penguins have a layer of fat under their skin for further insulation from the cold. The muscles that control their legs, along with most of the bones and tendons of their upper legs, are higher up inside their bodies, protected by warming fat and feathers. Their feet contain only tendon, bone, and thick skin. To keep their feet and flippers from getting frostbite, they have a countercurrent heat exchange system in the arrangement of their blood vessels. Heat from blood in the arteries supplying the feet and flippers is transferred to colder blood in nearby returning veins to warm it. So while keeping their feet and flippers above freezing, they also prevent their core from getting too cold. The penguins living in colder climates like these Adelies also have feathering all the way down their legs and covering much of their bills to keep them warm. On the other hand, occasionally, even emperor penguins living on ice need to cool off. The easy solution is to eat snow. Penguins use an ecstatic display call for bonding, as this group of chinstrap penguins is doing on Orn Island in Antarctica. Just below the belly on the chin strap in front is visible its brood patch of well-vascularized featherless skin, which is important for warm incubation of its eggs. The ecstatic call is often given during nest duty exchange when one of a pair returns from fishing. I have also seen a pair of rockhoppers launch into an ecstatic call when they looked down and saw that the female had just laid an egg. Either could be the case with these gentoos. Pigoshellus penguins like the Adelie at Brown Bluff often build nests of pebbles, which allow for drainage of rain or melting snow. In areas where climate warming has increased the amount of precipitation, penguins have compensated by piling on more pebbles to raise their nests. Another Adelie in the same colony is turning its egg, and this one nearby is looking after its two newly hatched chicks. Carrying pebbles to the nest is part of courting and nest building for Pigoshellus penguins, and pilfering pebbles goes with the process. This gentoo went about stealing pebbles with impunity from a nearby couple on South Georgia. When they caught and berated him, he stopped, looked around nonchalantly until they were distracted, and then went right back to stealing pebbles with gusto. Penguins are good jumpers and climbers. Seems they can do that as a hobby as well as for a living. I photographed this routine both years that I visited Brown Bluff. These two Adelies gave each other a look of let's go, and they climbed up on this chunk of ice, one after the other, and then jumped off. First one, and then the other, and then waddled off on their way. Antarctic silverfish, here being carried by an Antarctic tern on the Antarctic Peninsula, is one of the food preferences of emperor penguins. Penguins generally eat small fish, krill, squid, and even jellyfish when it's available. Krill, like the pink-colored catch of this Cape Petrel on Deception Island, is consumed by the ton by seabirds, whales, seals, fish, and squid. Penguins that eat krill poop pink, as in this gentoo colony at Cougarville on the peninsula. Scientists have been studying satellite photos looking for pink blobs that indicate penguin colonies. Using this approach, they have identified at least one new Adelie colony of 1.5 million birds and at least 8 or so new emperor colonies. Any discussion of penguins is incomplete without including predators. Lounging on an iceberg near a gentoo colony is a leopard seal, one of their primary predators. One leopard seal can eat at least 8 penguins a day. Skuas, another predator, live all around the Antarctic and subantarctic, nesting in the vicinity of penguin colonies and feeding their chicks with spoils gleaned from those colonies. Here's one patrolling the emperor colony at Snow Hill, and this one is flying off with a stolen egg from a rockhopper colony on Sea Lion Island. Also on Sea Lion, I recorded video of a skua at work. This exposed egg had somehow been cracked. so the Gentoo penguins were no longer protecting it. My intention was just to record the bird on the left placing dirt on his nest, which is typical behavior. Suddenly, there's lots of squawking, and a skua flies in to grab the cracked egg. Another skua tries to get away from him. Oh. But the first guy kept it. And take a look at the penguins around the scene. None of them that are sitting on eggs ever leave their eggs vulnerable. This little bird is called a tussock bird, and it's an endemic subspecies of blackish cinclodes. It's basically looking for whatever food it can get from there. These snowy sheathbills are nesting and living off a Gentoo colony at the British Post Office at Port Lockroyd on the peninsula. They are scavengers that live on penguin poop and fish or krill dropped on the ground by penguins feeding their chicks. They sometimes help that along by pulling on the tail of a penguin during a feeding, so it drops some of the regurgitated food. They will also eat penguin eggs or even chicks when the opportunity arises. Southern giant petrels prey on penguins. I watched from a cliff as one intercepted this lone returning rockhopper, always a risky move for a penguin. After I sadly saw the petrel catch the penguin, I went down with a longer lens and a tripod. By the time I got there, there were several giant petrels feeding from the carcass. I have zoomed in on this one to show more clearly the complexity of the tube-nosed bill structure. The tube serves to channel excreted salt away from the eyes and also helps them smell prey and carrion. When the giant petrels left, striated caracaras, cooperative hunters that live primarily on the Falkland Islands, got their turn, only to have to move over again when a giant petrel showed up, most likely a size-related pecking order. In the end, the caracaras flew off with the remains. Kelp gulls also nest and scavenge or prey near penguin colonies. These were at Brown Bluff, and this one was at Snow Hill. Another penguin predator, an orca or killer whale, was at Sea Lion Island, and it boldly came inside the rocks near shore. I was even able to photograph this one standing on the beach. Predators like leopard seals and orca often lurk near landing sites to ambush penguins. Penguins porpoise like this to move faster and to head off predators by interrupting their view from below. The penguins switch course abruptly when they hit the water and never resurface where you expect them, making them a challenge for photographers as well as for predators. These gentoos are coming ashore at Sea Lion Island, not too far from that orca and its pod. Currently, about 18 species of penguin or Sphenicidae are recognized, and they are divided into 6 genera. The genus Actinodites, meaning flightless diver, includes emperors and kings. They are considered the oldest species, are the largest penguins, and have a similar appearance, with orange or yellow auricular patches and colored bill plates. King's coloration is brighter, and the emperors are nearly twice the weight of kings, at about 80 pounds and about 10 inches taller, from 3.5 to 4 feet tall. They both incubate their single egg on their feet, covered by a warm flap of belly skin. Emperors nest in the coldest region of Antarctica, indicated in purple, mostly on fast ice, which is ice that is hardened, attached to land. And kings, indicated in blue, nest in the more temperate or warmer subantarctic region on land. The Scotia Arc between the southern tip of South America and the Antarctic Peninsula is considered geologically a continuation of the South American Andes mountain range all around the arc. It includes a lot of the areas where penguins nest. The Falkland Islands, also a haven for penguins, although nearby, are not considered part of the Scotia Arc, but are geologically more similar to South Africa. They most likely got left behind when the continent split apart. The Drake Passage is the open ocean within the arc. Its opening allows for the Antarctic circumpolar current and strong winds without any land to break them, which can sometimes make for a rough ride through there on a ship. I visited to see penguins all the areas marked on this map, including the Falkland Islands, Martillo Island in the Beagle Channel, South Georgia, and the Antarctic Peninsula. The Snow Hill Emperor Colony is on fast ice attached to the southwest corner of Snow Hill Island. The red marker indicates Ushuaia, the Argentinian port town from which I embarked on 4 of my Antarctic voyages. The Allardyce range of mountains on South Georgia illustrate the Andes continuation, visible here at St. Andrews Bay. And similarly, the Antarctic Andes are the Andes continuation on the Antarctic Peninsula, visible here at Paradise Bay. This was the scene at the Snow Hill Emperor Colony in 2018. The latest census from that year counted around 3,000 breeding pairs there. In the background are icebergs grounded in the fast ice, which function as windbreakers for the colony. An icebreaker was necessary for this trip because the colony is situated on sea ice far from the water's edge. Once the ship was positioned as close as it could safely push into the ice, we flew by helicopter from the ship to a point about 2 miles from the colony. Emperors returning from fishing accompanied us as we walked toward the colony. They were very curious and both checked us out and followed us. Since they are generally social with other penguins, it appeared that they just thought we were oddly large penguins. In the colony, a very small chick is still being protected on its parents' feet. Emperors only feed their own chick, and they only have 1 chick per season. Males incubate the single egg on top of their feet over the winter, rotating in warming huddles against the driving winds and cold. The incubating males often fast for 115 days or so, including the courting and mating period, followed by about 2 months of incubating the egg. The females return full of fish after the chick hatches, and the males leave to go fishing. Penguin parents and chicks of most species recognize each other by the sound of their voices in colonies of hundreds or even thousands of birds. The chicks keep calling so their parent will find and feed them. Idle adults stand or lie around on their bellies. Note the beautiful facial patterns and the depths feathering. Emperor penguin eggs are small for the size of the birds and have very, very thick shells, presumably to fortify them against rough weather and handling by tough, scaly feet with very, very sharp claws. Notice also how nice warm feathering on this emperor extends down its legs. A king penguin is holding its egg on its feet and will place the flap of skin over it, as these are doing, to incubate it. In contrast with emperors, kings alternate incubation with their mates every 12 to 21 days. Here, a group of king penguins is about to enter the water at St. Andrews Bay. Penguins frequently enter and exit the water in groups, primarily for safety from predators, but it is also thought that they may help each other find prey. These kings shared the beach with elephant seals, which were pupping, mating, or doing a lot of sleeping. The follow the leader instinct can be taken to the extreme. As I was walking with my sister-in-law towards Zodiac, we turned and discovered this parade of king penguins dutifully following us down the beach. Penguin researcher Gerald Kooiman describes a similar experience with emperors, with one penguin even trying to follow him into the Zodiac. In the Falklands and also in New Zealand, penguins find themselves sharing grass with sheep. Penguin chicks, such as this young king, have downy feathers to keep them warm, but penguin down is not waterproof and they must molt to adult plumage before entering the water to fish for their own food. Incidentally, early explorers thought these big brown king penguin chicks were a separate species of penguin. King penguins have the longest nesting cycle of any penguin. They hatch their chicks in mid-Antarctic summer, but the chicks don't molt into adult plumage until the following summer. So they must overwinter on land, often having to fast or nearly fast for 3 to 5 months, depending on food availability for their parents to bring them. They must rely for warmth on their down and huddling together in creches with other chicks. Many do not survive the winter, and after their feeding resumes, the parents take several months to feed them to fledging and then finally undergo their own molt. So a pair of kings can usually produce only 2 chicks every 3 years. A couple of these chicks are molting into adult plumage. King penguin chicks grow relatively much bigger than chicks of other penguin species before fledging. Even emperor chicks are only half the size of adults when they molt into waterproof plumage. Since emperors hatch on ice, they have to be ready to enter the water when the ice melts in summer. The genus Pygoscelis, or brush-tailed penguins, includes Adelie, chinstrap, and gentoo species. Adelie penguins, indicated in yellow, share the cold circumpolar region with emperor penguins, although they build pebble nests on ground and often lay 2 eggs instead of only 1. Their nesting calendar is also different from the emperors. The green spots represent chinstrap penguins, which bracket the 60° south parallel, with climate being warmer north of it than south of it. The red spots represent gentoos, of which more are found in the warmer region. The genus Phoeniscus, or banded penguins, live in more temperate climates than in Arctic and subantarctic penguins. These include African, Humboldt, Magellanic, and Galapagos penguins. They manage the warmer climate by nesting in burrows to protect themselves and their chicks from the heat. The pink skin surrounding their bills, which characterizes this genus, is highly vascularized and aids them in dispersing heat. The spots on the bellies of Phoeniscus penguins are unique to every individual. And in an effort to explain the banding or striping down their sides, researchers have introduced penguin-shaped white objects with and without band markings to a tank of fish. It turned out such banding scares and scatters fish, which would make it easier for the penguins to catch them. Penguins are pursuit divers. Galapagos penguins are the northernmost species living at the equator. Humboldts are the next species south, living along the coast of Peru and Chile. I photographed them at Isla Choros off the coast of Chile. Magellanics overlap the Humboldts in part of their range and swing around southern South America into Argentina and the Falkland Islands. During migration, Magellanics have also been seen as far north as Brazil. African penguins are found on islands off the coast of Namibia and South Africa. They also live in 2 easily visited mainland colonies near Cape Town, South Africa, which is where I photographed them. Galapagos penguins are very endangered and are currently one of the rarest penguin species. Fortunately, efforts made to provide them with additional nesting caves to replace those that have been flooded by sea level rise have been successful. Galapagos penguins have been most seriously impacted by El Niño's southern oscillation warming, suppressing the cold, nutrient-rich Cromwell current, reducing the availability of fish enough to lead to nest abandonment and even starvation of adults. Mostly because of El Niño, their population is now thought to have been reduced to around 4,000 birds, which is less than half the pre-1980s numbers. A small percentage of Galapagos penguins has been found to harbor avian malaria. While they do not seem to exhibit symptoms, there is the concern that in El Nino years, those birds will become further stressed and succumb more easily. On the other hand, captive outdoor penguins in zoos have become so threatened by another strain of avian malaria that they are dosed in summer with anti-malaria medication. Avian malaria is not the type that infects humans. On the right is a juvenile Galapagos penguin which lacks the distinct facial and side markings of adults. Mangroves, which occur in the tropics and subtropics, are hardly a habitat one would associate with penguins, but here they are in the Galapagos. And this Galapagos penguin is being reflected along with surrounding mangroves. Humboldt penguins, which I photographed from a little boat in rough water on Isla Choros, Chile, are threatened by commercial overfishing, by illegal explosive fishing, by guano harvesting for fertilizer, by egg theft, and by poaching for food. Like the Galapagos penguins, these are affected by El Nino events, which also result in starvation. A problem for them and for all penguins to various degrees is bycatch and fishing nets, which often results in drowning. Penguins burrow in accumulated seabird guano for protection from weather and from predators, but massive guano harvesting for fertilizer since the late 19th century has markedly reduced Humboldt penguin numbers. Currently, there is protection at some sites, including some with walls built by the Peruvian government, protected by full-time guards. There is also a successful project to provide them with artificial nests in some areas. The current overall population of this species is estimated at around 40,000 birds, down from over 1 million in the mid-19th century. I visited by car in 2016 the mainland African penguin colonies in South Africa at Boulders Beach and Stony Point. African penguins, like the Humboldts, have taken a huge hit from guano harvesting from the islands they inhabit and from egg harvesting, both of which are now prohibited. They have also suffered from massive oil spills and overfishing. The spontaneous mainland colonies began in 1982, and it is thought that they were the result of the decline of anchovies and sardines, their favorite prey near the offshore islands. The oil spill of the year 2000 brought penguin experts from all over the world, and together they saved 90% of 20,000 oiled penguins. Another 20,000 healthy but starving penguins were captured before they could get oiled. They were released nearly 600 miles away so that by the time they returned, the oil near their island had been cleaned up. At Boulders Beach, you pay an admission fee to walk on a boardwalk to view African penguins. The South African government is doing all they can to conserve them. Establishing no-take fishing zones near the colony has increased the number of penguins. On the other hand, in late 2021, in the first incident of its type, 63 of these penguins died after receiving multiple stings around their eyes and flippers from an angry swarm of honeybees. Residents in the area are now asked not to keep honeybees. In one of the parking lots there, you are warned to look for penguins under your vehicle. A pair was mating right near the sign. At Boulders Beach, fiberglass nest boxes provided for the penguins are being used. A new style of ceramic nests, which keep the penguins cooler than even their guano nests, are now being introduced successfully on their offshore islands. This African penguin at Stony Point has found the perfect condo, complete with a resonant rock hyrax or daisy on the roof. An African penguin parent is guarding its 2 chicks. The young penguin on the right is probably being told that he's old enough to catch his own fish. Magellanic penguins mostly dig their own burrows in soil. This one is standing by its burrow on Pebble Island in the Falklands, and this one is in its burrow there. Magellanics will also make use of a man-made option. This was the bottom step of an active staircase at Martillo. This is the view for those penguins returning to the colony on Martillo Island at the very southern tip of Argentina. Tickets for tours to Martello Island are sold at a kiosk near the docks in Ushuaia. Magellanics sometimes line their nests with twigs. An immature Magellanic is the one with less distinct markings. These on sea lion in the Falklands need to go fishing, but they are anxious and braying to each other because they know that there is a pod of orca just offshore. This is exactly where I photographed the orca in the morning. The once mammalian predator-free New Zealand islands hosted a variety of penguin species. There were a lot of prehistoric penguins, and the oldest fossil, called Waimanu, found there in 1980, is thought to be about 62 million years old. It was at about that time that penguins split off from albatrosses and petrels. The remaining living species are threatened by human activity and by introduced mammalian predators. To their credit, caring New Zealanders and their excellent Department of Conservation has made inroads into protecting their penguins. The Banks Peninsula on the east coast of the South Island is home to the unique white flippered penguins. Snares penguins live on the Snares Island, below that, and red-crested on the Bounty and Antipodes Islands, over here. Yellow-eyed penguins live on the Auckland Islands and off the Otago Peninsula on the mainland. The best views and photos of fjordland-crested penguins were from the Wilderness Lodge, Lake Meraki on the west coast of the South Island. South of New Zealand is Macquarie Island, an Australian territory with kings, rockhoppers, gentoos, and its unique royal penguins. The genus Eudiptula, consisting primarily of the little blue penguin, found along the south coast of Australia and all around the coast of New Zealand. The little blue on the right was living in the breakwater at St. Kilda Harbour in Melbourne, Australia in 2006. White flippered penguins like the one on the left nest only on the Banks Peninsula and on nearby Motunau Island in New Zealand. Like the Spheniscus group, little penguins nest in burrows, and they readily take advantage of nest boxes built for them. As of 2012, white flippered penguins, which are slightly larger, lighter colored, and have white all around their flippers, have been considered as a separate subspecies or color morph of the little blue. However, they are not included in the species count of 18. Chris Challis worked hard to bring back white flippered penguins to Harris Bay on the Banks Peninsula after they had been eradicated by stoats. In 1998, he proudly showed us some chicks, the result of his conservation efforts. In October 2019, I went to Flea Bay, farther out on the Banks Peninsula. On the right is conservationist and artist Dr. Lynette Hartley, my New Zealand guide, and on the left is Joey Helps, our guide at Pohatu Penguins. Joey is the daughter of Francis and Shireen Helps, who bought the Flea Bay farm over 30 years ago to raise sheep and discovered they were sharing land with a large white flippered penguin colony that needed their protection. Joey grew up caring for penguins and sheep. Flea Bay is still a working sheep farm. The lighter color of the white flippered penguin is a close match to these coastal waters, which are colored a turquoise blue by glacial silt washed down from the surrounding mountains. Joey lifted the lid of a box to show us a nesting white flippered penguin. They carefully monitor the penguins, which are very loyal to their numbered boxes, but do not band their flippers because banding in the wild has been shown to slow them down and decrease survival. While most of the penguins on the Banks Peninsula are white flippered, like the bird on the right, which only nest once a year, a few of their pairs are mixed with little blues, like the bird on the left, which generally nest twice a year. This has caused some interesting dilemmas, most often when the female is a little blue and wants to nest twice, but the male doesn't. He will father a second clutch of chicks, but then leaves to fish, returns to molt, and won't help raise them. One little blue female has solved this dilemma successfully by doing her second nesting with a different male 3 years in a row. There are around 1,250 nesting pairs on their property. New Zealanders have found that these powerful snap traps are the most humane way to eliminate invasive predators like this hedgehog. The genus Megadiptes comprises only one species, the yellow-eyed penguin, also known by its Maori name of hoeho. This one was on Enderby Island in the Aucklands in 1998. In 2019, sitting in a blind, we observed yellow-eyed penguins coming ashore one at a time on the Otago Peninsula. Yellow-eyeds nest in privacy, well out of view of other pairs, hidden under boulders and roots in the shelter of scrub or low forest. Their forest nesting habitat has been markedly diminished by logging and land clearance for farming. So some low trees called negayo have been planted for them, and they readily make use of man-made nesting shelters like this one placed under the trees. In contrast with most penguin species, yellow-eyed penguins will not breed in captivity. They are severely, severely threatened by avian diphtheria and more recently by avian malaria. There is currently an effort underway to produce a vaccine against the avian diphtheria. Natural predators of these penguins are hookers or New Zealand sea lions. The penguins walked or hopped up the grassy hill to their nesting area. The genus Eudiptes comprises the crested penguins, which are thought to have derived from the yellow-eyed. The crested species include royal, macaroni, Fiordlander tuaki, snares, erect crested, and northern rockhopper or Mosley's penguin, and southern rockhopper with its various races. The odd characteristic of crested penguins is that they lay 2 eggs, of which the first is usually smaller than the second. The smaller egg may be discarded or hatches last, and that chick often doesn't survive. If there's an exceptional amount of food available, some of these species will raise both chicks. In general, the crested penguins live in the more temperate subantarctic region, with a few macaronis making it to the Antarctic Peninsula where I have seen them. The similar royal penguins live only on Macquarie Island. The unusual northern rockhoppers are found at the lighter magenta spots, live only on a few islands in the Tristan da Cunha group in the Atlantic, and on Amsterdam and St. Paul in the Indian Ocean. That's the only species I haven't seen in the wild, but I expect to finally get to see them at Tristan in 2024. These affectionate royal penguins were on the beach at Macquarie in 1998, and they were part of a large colony there. The history of penguins on Macquarie Island is grim. At the beginning of the 20th century, royal and king penguins were melted down for oil. A popular outcry ended this carnage, but only after about 3 million penguins had been slaughtered. In addition, until recently, there was a big problem with introduced rodents on the island, including thousands of rabbits, which were causing erosion. Conservation efforts have eliminated all introduced pests, and the penguin population has largely recovered. Above is a white-faced royal on Macquarie in 1998 to compare with a black-faced macaroni below that were nesting on South Georgia in 1992. There has been some debate over whether the royal is just a color morph of the macaroni, but most accept them as a separate species. They have been known to only very rarely interbreed. This macaroni penguin on Saunders was part of a single pair that was nesting in the rockhopper colony. Here it is on the left compared with a southern rockhopper. Rockhoppers can walk, but they do a lot of hopping. They also porpoise to get quickly to shore and avoid predators. And once they have arrived near the rocks, they leap out of the water, the closest penguins ever come to flying. Having landed, they scale the rocks to the cliffs where they have their nests. The rocks have toenail scrapings from hundreds of years of climbing penguins. Rockhoppers often build their nests in mixed colonies with imperial cormorants. Penguins sometimes exhibit isabelline or brown color variants. An isabelline rockhopper on Pebble Island is paired with a normal colored mate. In New Zealand, Lynette drove us the 8 hours through the Southern Alps across the South Island to the wilderness lodge Lake Meraki. Dr. Jerry McSweeney and his wife, Ann Saunders, the proprietors of the lodge, have dedicated their lives to ecotourism as a means of conserving the native New Zealand rainforest. A big part of that effort has been protecting the Fiordland penguins, which nest in the rainforest. They worked with the New Zealand DOC to have the beach declared a wildlife refuge so they could keep dogs out. Dogs chase and kill penguins for sport. Jerry led us through the rainforest and streams to get to the beach where we didn't have to wait long for the penguins. Tawaki descended from the rainforest where their nests are hidden beneath the roots of trees. They nest in loose colonies of only 60 birds or so. After landing, this Tawaki with attitude stood by, preening on a rock. An organization called the Tawaki Project uses satellite tracking to show that these birds forage surprisingly far to the south of New Zealand, closer to Antarctica after they have finished nesting. The only explanation so far that they can offer is that they have a vestigial affinity to the area. Our last penguin, JT, was at Moody Gardens Aquarium in Galveston, Texas, the only zoo in the United States that currently has a few of these northern rockhopper or Mosley's penguins. They are the ones that live on remote islands in the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. The most distinctive characteristic of northern rockhoppers is their pretty and elaborate top-knot spray of yellow feathers. Aside from threats from oil spills, commercial overfishing, and bycatch and fishing gear, these days, an additional threat is from killing by subantarctic fur seals, whose numbers have rebounded since their decline during the sealing era. They sometimes eat the penguins, but rogue fur seals have killed 100 penguins at a shot and just left the carcasses floating in the water. JT was 28 years old at the time and had almost finished with his molt. I will end with an interesting note told me by the biologist accompanying him. The king penguins we have in the Central Park Zoo in New York City come from Moody Gardens, and those birds are descendants of kings. They had hatched from eggs brought from South Georgia to start their penguin exhibit over 20 years ago. In fact, it is possible to see 7 species of penguin in different zoos in New York City. Here are a few books about penguins that you might want to photograph with your cell phones. The broadest and most up-to-date introduction would be the first book on the list. In addition, many research papers can be found by searching on the internet. Thank you, and I'm up for taking any questions. Would you like me to stop sharing?
No, this is fine.
No.
Thank
Okay.
you so much for that presentation, Dr. Bondi. That was absolutely fantastic. And your photos were gorgeous and the videos were just an added bonus. I just want to remind everyone, we will be sending a follow-up email, and I can be sure to include these references that you have on the screen here. So just be on the lookout for that sometime next week. And we will go ahead and open it up for some questions. So for starters, we have, how does guano protect the penguins?
It's hardened, and the penguins are able to burrow in it. So it keeps them, it protects them from the weather and the sun, which beats down, and it also shelters them from predators.
Okay, thank you. If someone is subject to motion sickness, where is the best place to see penguins up close besides a zoo or an aquarium?
There actually is a very large mainland Magellanic colony at Punta Tombo in Argentina.
Oh, okay.
There's also meclizine in the patch.
There we go. And what sparked your interest in penguins?
I've just always loved them since I was young. And when Rebecca asked me to join her on that trip to South Georgia, I said, "What's there?" She said, "Penguins." And I said, "Okay, I'm coming."
There you go. All right.
And the more I saw, the more I wanted to see more.
All right. Do you have a favorite penguin?
Oh my goodness. The rock hoppers are adorable. And when I was photographing those ones jumping down from the colony at Sea Lion, I was sitting on a rock with a tripod photographing for quite some time. And I looked down and several of them had just laid down next to me. They were keeping me company.
Oh my gosh.
Very
That is so
emotional little
sweet.
guys.
Oh yeah, that is adorable. All right, let's see. Up next, we have, what impact does climate change have on penguins?
Sea level rise and warming seems to be the biggest problem. And the change in the El Nino Southern Oscillation currents and the generation of them, and thereby suppressing the cold currents that carry the nutrients for their food, seem to be the biggest problem. There's now a problem in Antarctica with the emperor colonies because they nest on fast ice. There are a few colonies actually, or at least one that I know of that's on land, but most of them are still on ice. And the chicks have to fledge to waterproof plumage before the ice melts. If the ice melts too early, they drown. And there has been a problem with that in a number of colonies.
Okay. So keeping that in mind, what is the outlook for penguin conservation as we head into the future?
Oh my goodness, I guess it depends on where you look and who you ask and which penguins they are. I mean, people are working really, really hard to conserve them. And, like the problem with the illness for the yellow-eyed penguins, some of that actually may be due to climate change, that they have this problem with diphtheria, which is really serious. They're losing a lot of chicks to it. And there are researchers that actually go and look for the chicks and try and treat them before they choke to death. There are projections that by 2050 there won't be any emperors, but you don't know because things change. And colonies of king penguins disappear, but others get bigger, and the same thing has happened with Adelies that disappear from one area, but then all of a sudden this colony of 1.5 million birds shows up somewhere else. So it's hard to project. I mean, ask a penguin researcher and probably ask anyone and they'll give you a different answer.
Okay.
I think it depends on how well we control climate change and how the other problem for the penguins is not just climate change, but commercial fishing. And some of that is almost more impactful than just the global warming and changing of temperatures and melting of ice. If they don't have any food, they can't survive either. If the food is too far from where the colony is, they burn too much energy trying to get food for their chicks, and they often can't. It just doesn't work. There are efforts to control fishing near some of the colonies on the Antarctic Peninsula during nesting season, so that fishermen are requested to do their fishing farther out. I mean, just like with the African penguins, South Africa has restricted fishing in the area of the inland colonies, and it works. I mean, that's really a big problem.
Great, thank you. And I think we have time for one more here. So when referring to the king penguins, how long do the females leave to feed while the males are left to sit on the eggs?
Are you talking, well, with the king penguins, they do nest exchange like 15 to 21 days. With the emperors, it's about 2 months, I think, that they do the egg incubation, and it's timed such that once the female lays her egg, she leaves, she gives the egg, transfers the egg very carefully to the male because it can't go on the ice because it'll chill and die. So there's a whole ritual that is associated with the egg transfer. Then she leaves and finds her way to the open ocean and goes fishing and needs to return after the chick hatches. The male can produce something that almost looks like milk for a few days after it hatches, but then if the female doesn't return, with enough fish to feed the chick, it also doesn't survive. But that's basically how that works.
Well, great. Thank you. I think that is all we have time for today. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. This was a fantastic presentation by Dr. Bondi. Be sure to tune in for our next webinar, Raptors of New Jersey, which kicks off on February 1st. And that will be co-hosted with the Cape May Raptor Banding Project. So thank you again, Dr. Bondi, for this wonderful presentation. And thank you for everyone for tuning in. We will see you next time.
Thank you, Lily.